Gold, it makes Azeroth go around, and in a virtual world with millions of other players, it carries an enormous amount of importance, and always has in every version of WoW, just to varying different degrees. In vanilla, respec costs, training new skills and affording a mount would see your pockets constantly empty. The Burning Crusade introduced flying, which by itself sets you back over 5,000 gold, an unimaginable amount for the average player back then. Wrath of the Lich King introduced more ways to flex your gold if you found yourself with a little too much, through things like the Traveler's Tundra Mammoth for 20k, this gave you your own little repair vendor, and the Violet Signet Ring for 8,500 gold, which gave you an additional Hearthstone back to Dalaran. Jumping forwards a lot to Battle for Azeroth, there's a vendor who sells recolors of different frogs for several 100,000 gold apiece, but the crowning jewel of the gold hoarder has to be, without a doubt, the longest boy in Azeroth. 5 million gold was the price for your own portable auction house. Then again, all of these things, whilst a way to flex that gold pouch, are set prices. They don't change. Blizzard decides the value of them, but it's far from the only service that players can put their gold into. What about the services that players have created within the game, the value in other players' time, skill, or abilities? In vanilla or TBC, if you wanted a piece of gear enchanted, you needed to find an enchanter with a recipe you're after, trade them the materials, hope they don't log off, trade them again, put up the item you want enchanted, check it's the right enchant, and then a tip is normal, surely. How much would that be? A few gold? Same deal for getting a mage portal to travel around faster, or for them to make you level 55 water in Classic. How about getting a Lionheart helm crafted by the only guy who has the recipe on the server? These services are built into the game, where players have decided the costs of the interactions, though they tend to be smaller interactions at that, and the high value trades among professions are usually short-lived when an item is new, or just very few people have the access to make it. So then, what is the price of a Gladiator title, a Warglaive of Azinoth, cutting edge for the latest raid tier, or your weekly plus 15? What is the price of playing the game as a passenger, sitting in the back seat, being carried to your destination? Now that is where things start to go off the tracks a little bit. I was originally thinking of doing this video following tier 6 dropping in TBC, with it proving to be a more simple series of raids than tier 5. Many gold bid runs have started flying through there, and seeing hundreds of thousands dropped on individual items, not even the glaives. But Blizzard recently have decided to make boosting communities also against their terms of service, which certainly ties into how players seek to actively use gold as a method to access many of the game's rewards, and it fits in really well with something I actually wanted to already include in this video. Also, before we go on, a welcome to all the new subs since a new year. There's been quite a bit of growth. We're getting towards 110k on YouTube now. Would be amazing to hit that target soon and to try and make 2022 a great year. Anyway, here's a quote I found a little while ago, and I think this is a big true for games. It is regarding a monetization policy, not in-game activity, however, but let's take a look at it. It says, "We should avoid selling anything in-game that is understood to be earned, and we should always sell things which are understood to be bought." Since it's pretty abstract, I think it's helpful to use an analogy. We should never be in the business of selling medals of honor, but we should always be in the business of selling Lamborghinis. This, what I've just gone over, is what players have taken the liberty of doing over many years, whilst Blizzard has offered the ways to make it highly profitable through the likes of the WoW token and historically slow speed to act when it comes to banning gold buyers. Let's take some examples from before and think, should I be able to buy this from another player in game, or should I have to earn it myself? What about enchanting your gear, mage portals or crafted gear, as opposed to a gladiator title, a warglaive or keystone master? It sounds pretty clear cut to me. I don't tend to see a glad title and think, how much? That should mean that person is pretty damn good at PvP. A Keystone Master mount means they're a member of a solid team and a competent player, and a Warglaive is what you get for being a long-standing part of a raid team and an overall asset to the guild. Well, that's what I'd like to say, because all of these are now services in WoW. This is why a lot of people are happy to see boosting communities go in retail. Not only is it a terrible new player experience to walk into a major city and have your chat absolutely filled with spam, but it cuts away at the integrity behind the achievements, behind all the things that by all intentions should be earned. In fact, I'd be willing to bet quite a lot of players get caught in boosts by accident, because it happened to me. I was doing my weekly key in BFA on the Elemental Shaman around Halloween time. After spamming the LFG for ages and finally being picked up, I get invited to an Atel Desar +8 by some Russians. No problem, I think. We get the rest of the group going, we have a Blood DK tank, a Resto Druid, and the run's looking just fine. We go in, we clear it up, we +2 the key, and we get a 10, which was the cap for keys at that point in time. The next dungeon is a +10 King's Rest, and it was a tyrannical week, means bosses have more health and do more damage. Not exactly my first choice, because King's Rest bosses are a pain, but it's right next to Atel Desar, and the Russian guys asked if I wanted to stay on. Of course I did. I was after my +10 for the week. Over on the way to King's Rest, they invited a Shadow Priest to the group. So running a Shadow Priest in low mythic plus keys in BFA was kind of like helping an old lady across the street, or building up your good karma, or doing your good deed for the day. Suffice to say, Shadow Priests were one of the least popular DPS you could have possibly picked. But I thought these nice Russian guys were giving people a chance, and we did just +2 the last dungeon, so let's go for it, I thought. In we go then, and it didn't start well. The Shadow Priest was living up to expectations in the worst way possible, barely doing any damage whatsoever. At the first boss, he just AFK'd mechanics and ended up causing a wipe, so I had to explain to him, you get the debuff, you go stand at the back, and then we deal with the debuff. Easy. We run back, we go again, we kill the boss. It must have been an 8-minute boss fight in the end, on a +10 no less, so it was looking like it was going to be a long run. And then the Shadow Priest comes out and says, damn, I know it's a discount price for the holidays, but I didn't realise it was going to be a discount run as well. I just turfed out, logged off, and I'm pretty sure I didn't get my +10 done that week. Moral of the story is, never invite Shadow Priests. Anyways, boosting communities have provided a one-stop shop in WoW for everything really. Keystone Master, weekly keys, arenas, raids. Now since Blizzard have made these communities against terms of service, they won't be quite so overbearing, and I'm surprised Blizzard have actually took this step. I would bet, however, new guilds will start popping up with names like Totally Not Huacan, who are 100% just normal guilds who only play on that one specific server, who will continue offering the services. And if you did buy services regularly, I find it hard to believe that things will actually change. They're just not going to be publicized nearly as much anymore. And though I feel the WoW token has provided a legitimized way to transmute your dollars into gold, it's not exactly the only way players have sought to circumvent actually having to play the game in pursuit of achievements. Over on Classic, we have a thing called GDKP, or Gold Bid Runs, or some variation on that. It stands for Gold Dragon Kill Points, which also makes no sense. What it actually means in English is you do a raid, purple items drop, and then the highest bidder in gold wins the item. At the end of the raid, the gold is tallied up and then divided out among the raiders. Cuts aren't just a flat 25 players, so we're going to divide it by 25 either. Some gold bid runs are performance based to encourage players not to semi-AFK and want to play well. The organizers will take a cut, of course, and some classes get a utility cut or extra for performing a certain role at the detriment of their own performance in the raid. It's a very well-oiled machine, and unfortunately, it brings out the worst in players' desire to buy over earn. The volume of gold that have been thrown at items in TBC have well exceeded that of Classic. I did a video in Classic about a sword called Gressel Dawn of Ruin, which sold for nearly 200,000 gold, which is just a bit short of the actual gold cap. This was around $3,500 at the time, and during that I went over how impossibly absurd it is that any single player could have amassed that volume of wealth themselves and then been willing to throw it all on one single item. But you know what TBC has that Classic didn't? Glaives. Okay, Classic had Thunder Fury, but the thing about Thunder Fury is there are better weapons for doing damage, therefore glaives are automatically the better orange weapon. There's already been plenty of rumours for them selling for hundreds of thousands of gold. And check this out that I found back in 2007, an account from a player from Method no less reportedly sold for $10,000. Even by today's standards, that's impressive. The problem is though, they sold the account. That is a big no-no. Bad. If you just so happened instead to bring along several gold caps on a few different characters to a run where glaives drop and then bidded for them, that is very much within the game's rules. Though glaives these days are often pre-sold to the buyer before the raid begins. There's not going to be 10 people bidding on one item anymore in TBC because there's not that many people class stacking as much. It was recently asked of Blizzard too whether the boosting terms of service changes would include GDKPs, to which they said if it means an exchange of gold only without the middleman entity, then it sounds like the sort of guild activities players have been enjoying for 17 years, which are not the focus of this policy update. And this is something people always bring up around criticism of GDKPs. They have always existed, but It's just a problem now. What gives? I don't think the idea of GDKP took off properly, as in it became much more commonplace until mid to late Wrath of the Lich King in retail, with more difficulty levels, more catch-up gear to entice rerolls, and a lack of achievements in the way. It made sense for it to happen then. It happened before that, of course it did. It was a thing even back in the EverQuest days, but it really rose to prominence for World of Warcraft during Wrath of the Lich King. Back then you would have had a guild that cleared the content, had some space in the raid, and they can easily blast and carry a few people who can just buy the extra items they don't want, which would otherwise just end up being disenchanted. Nowadays, within the first week of tier 6 opening, gold bid runs have been clearing and amassing gold pots of hundreds of thousands of gold. Some of them even do multiple runs per week. They are both a similar idea, it's just the modern one is much more hardcore and efficient. A bit of a reflection of the wider player base too, actually. And GDKP has got its benefits, of course it does. A big item drops, everybody gets paid. You don't have to wait for a loot council to award you it, and it cuts out a big part of the RNG in getting items. It's also good in the same way that coal is a great source of fuel if we just casually ignore any potential downside it has. I mean, I can still make a fire and I'm warm, so it's okay, right? It's not like there's going to be a future or anything. The real problem with big items and big bids is like completing the earn 600k without doing any GDKP challenge. Impossible difficulty, I hear. And a lot of people thought GDKPs were going to be smaller amounts in TBC with smaller raids, not having 10 warriors stacked per raid anymore to bid each other up, but the volume of gold that has been gradually circulated and rising up through people running these week upon week is just crazy. There are guilds that are shards of larger guilds that raid several times a week for the sole purpose of gold runs, sort of like communities. Also, Classic still has Master Loot, which is a super important factor for this still working. They took that privilege away in BFA because, honestly, I just think they wanted one less thing for GMs to do, for the GMs that are left, that is. But World of Warcraft has become a space where anything can be bought for the right price. Perhaps this is gaming as a whole too, though, skipping over all the boring progression stuff and looking at that perfect, pristine character, and then logging off until next patch. And the issue with buying all these things that should really be earned, it's all perfectly fine in a world where players can create their own supply and demand, if not one of the things that an MMORPG should strive for. Maybe it's the players that have changed even more than the games have after all. Let me know your thoughts on it all either way though. As always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. I shall see you all in the next one very soon.